Okay, so this session is going to be talking about input controls and going from the basic input control and then going into other examples and hopefully some ways to use input controls that you might not have thought about before. So input controls are a way to filter data. That was the main purpose of adding them. And they've been around for a long time, but I still think that they're not used extensively. And I'm hoping that this session will help boost their popularity once again. All right. So I'm going to show real quick how to make a basic input control in case anybody has not seen that. So I want to be able to filter on my different regions here and just show one region at a time or go back to showing all of them. So in my available objects over here, on the left panel, I'm going to select my input control icon and then go up to new. And I'm going to base this on my customer region object. Click next. And we have these different options here. The upper section allows us to choose a single value at one time with any of these types of selectors. And then the bottom part allows multiple selections. So check boxes, list box, and double sliders in a tree list. All right. In this case, I'm going to use radio buttons to display my 4 regions, and it's going to get the list of values from the report. So I don't need to make any changes for that. I do want to allow them to select all in case they want to. And then here we could specify how many rows to display. For example, in this case, I only have 4 regions, so I can leave it at the default 5. If I was making this list on my customer states, the list obviously is much longer than 5. And we would have to do quite a bit of scrolling if we only displayed 5 states. So I would want to increase that to show at least 10 or 15 at a time, maybe even 20, depending on how much room we had over on the left, including other input controls that were on the report. All right, so I'm just going to go with radio button, keep these defaults, and click next. And then here's where we specify what do we want to apply this change to. In this particular report, I only have 1 block, so I could apply it to the whole tab or the entire document. And that would include both tabs that I have here. In this case, I just want to apply it to the one table that I have here, so block 1. And I'll click finish. And that displays my input control over here with the radio buttons, and I can quickly toggle to a particular region, and you'll see that the states within here now are corresponding to the regions that I have over here. And then I can return to all and show all of them. Okay, so that's your basic input control. As soon as they came out with input controls, the need quickly arose to have a cascading effect. For example, on the second tab here, I have 3 input controls. I have my regions, states, and then cities. And originally when they came out, this is all we had. So if I select West region here, and I selected Alabama, I'd end up with no data here because Alabama isn't in the West. So it leaves open the possibility of making a selection that will produce no data, that we filtered out too much and don't have the data that we want. So then BusinessObjects came out with another service pack that included the grouping object option. So this group here allows us to group together the input controls and have that cascading effect so that when I make a selection here and I select South, that only the states that are in the South will show up in my list. All right. And I'll show how we set that up real quick. Click on group. And I'll call this locations. And then I can select one or more. In this case, I want all three of them, region, state, and city. And again, I can apply it to the current report or the entire report. And I just want to apply it to the current report. I'll click OK. So now if I click on West, you see how my list here has reduced and only showing states that are on the West Coast. And if I click on Arizona, then I only see cities that are in Arizona. Okay. Notice also that when I made a selection here that the input control has collapsed and is just showing the selection stated up here. So it says I've chosen Arizona and the West region. It does that by default and only the first time through. So if I expand this out and select California, my cities will change again, but it doesn't collapse again. If you want it to collapse, you can always use the arrow to collapse it down. And then we also have, let's say I selected down at the city level here. I could click on the reset at the top and that resets all three input controls at once back to the top. So that really helped things out and made input controls even more powerful because in many situations, we really needed it to cascade the results down to only show valid selections here. Locations is an easy way to show it, but it can be applied in other situations where you have your departments and you want to go down to lower levels or time periods. You could go from year, quarter, month, that type of thing as well. Many other situations where you could filter subsequent input controls based on previous selections. And I have seen this used at many customer sites as well. So that's cool to see that it's being used now. All right, so that is the basic input controls, a way to filter the data. However, also after they were introduced, we realized that there are other ways that we could take advantage of having the input control return data. And that's what I'm going to show in this second example here. So in this Webby dashboard here, I've got a visual here, and I've set it up so that you can change what that visual looks like. Do you want to display it as a tile like this? Or do you want to display it as a bullet and see how close you are to the goal that way? Or as a speedometer? So you could give users a different way to view the data. So now let's take a look at this a little bit further. Tile, bullet, and speedometer, those aren't values that I have, or chart type isn't a value that I had in my universe. So how do we go about setting up this scenario where we're using data that is not part of our universe, which we did in these cases? All of these were part of our universe. So how do we handle that when we want to do some, we like in the dashboard world, we call this the dynamic visibility, to be able to show or hide things based on a selection. So that is what I'm going to show on this next tab here. So over here, I've got a chart and a table. and I want to allow users, I'm going to give them the visual first, but if they want to get down to the data and see more details about it, they can toggle onto that. All right, so I've got a table and a chart, and I'll switch to design mode. And to start off with, I'm just going to create what I like to call a seed variable, the seed that I'm going to use to create my input control based on a variable that isn't part of my universe. All right. And I'm going to call this chart/table. All right. And in the formula, I'm just going to say equals chart. Like that. And in quotes. So it's just a text string, right? I'll click OK. All right. So now if I drag and drop that variable on to my report, I just want you to be able to see it, the result of that. All right, we've got our variable here that says chart. This is what I'm going to base my input control on. So I'll start that new input control and base it on my variable chart table. And again, I'm going to use radio buttons. I like that look on the left. It allows us to see everything, and it's a small list. It's just a new chart or table, right? So this becomes the key, this list of values. We can use a custom list of values or get it from report data. And since this isn't part of our report data, it will be a custom list of values. So I can click on the ellipses and select chart, which is my default value in there. And then I can add a second or multiple list of values here. So I'm going to type in table and hit enter. And that gives me another value for chart and table. I can add as many as I want here to use for my input control. All right, I'll click OK. Now, in this case, it wouldn't make sense to have all values. I don't want to show both the chart and the table like it is currently. I want to show one or the other. So in that case, we have to notice it says missing default value. We have to select one of them. And I could use a drop down, or I could just type chart in there. All right, that finished off my input control. And currently, if I toggle back and forth between these, my objects aren't changing here, although you will notice the change in the variable, okay? If I switch back to chart, that changes to chart. If I switch to table, that changes to table. So now that we can capture that information, I can use that on the hide options in all of our formats. So the table format or the chart format, we can use this hide when the following formula is true. And so essentially this becomes our dynamic visibility. I want to hide this chart when this chart table variable says chart. So I'm going to come to my variable. Chart table equals chart. And then I'm going to copy that for simplicity's sake, and I'll use that on the chart as well. So I'll right click on the chart and say format chart. And I'll check the box here and I'll paste that formula, but modify, we want to hide the chart when the variable says table. I'll say okay. So now my table disappeared. If I switch my input control to chart, my chart disappears. And so the last thing I would want to do is I can align these two. I'll go to my document structure and I'll select, see how it's showing a hidden table there, and here's my hidden bar chart here. So I can right click on there and format chart and make it relative to the top side of my variance table. Change that to 0. And the left side of my variance table. Change that to 0. Okay. Now, when I go back to my input control, they should be, there we go. It's on the top there. I switch back to table. And that's exactly what I did on the first tab as well. Okay. I don't need this on my report. I mostly just wanted it there so you could see the change happening. Okay. So that concept allows us to use input controls. In that case, here on this report, it's really not filtering. It's just allowing us to capture the input of a selection for our report. So if I edit this input control on the list of values here, you'll see tile, bullet, and speedometer. The seed one just said tile, and then I typed in bullet and speedometer. Okay, it's that easy. All right, so another scenario where we might want to use this is being able to give users the option to input their selection for conditional formatting. So in this report, I'm showing opportunities and wanting to highlight opportunities that are above a certain threshold, and then also some that are below a certain threshold. In this case, it defaulted to 400,000, so only my large deals are showing up here. However, I want the user to be able to choose their own threshold and say, really, I'm interested in fields or revenue, any kind of deals that are over 300,000. And I'll hit enter or OK. And now anything over the 300 is being highlighted. And again, I could lower this or raise this maybe 100,000. And that highlights the smaller deals in the yellow. Okay, so again, a way to give some flexibility to your end users when they're analyzing the report. If one person wants to have a different threshold than another user, you can put the control in their hands by giving them input controls to do that. All right, another example here. This is also capturing the value for the selection here. So again, in this case, the chart that this is affecting is this column chart over here on the right. And I created a dynamic dimension to display either by months or by quarter. So it toggles there. And then also to dynamically select a different KPI. So currently it's showing total discount, but I could switch easily to revenue or number of orders or number of products. So the advantage of this is that within a very small window, a small square of my Webby dashboard, in this case, I have a lot of information. They can analyze information in different ways, but all in this one small area. Okay. In this case, again, I started with a seed variable, And then I created another variable. Let me show you that variable real quick. Let's see. So for my time periods, the seed one was quarterly. And then my dynamic dimension said, if the time period equals monthly, then show the month name. And I shortened it to just the first 3 letters of the month so it would fit nicely in my area. Else, show me the order quarter. So it just toggles based on the selection of this time period input control. Then it either shows the month or the quarter. And same for my dynamic dimension or my measure. Sorry, here's my dynamic measure. If the KPI, that's my input control over here. If my KPI says revenue, then display the revenue object. If the KPI equals number of orders, then display the number of order object, and on down. Okay, so using this dynamic measure for my table, if I display the objects to use in that column chart, you'll see that I'm using my dynamic dimension and my dynamic measure. So whatever the results are from the selection of my input control, the chart changes accordingly. Okay, so now I'm using the results and another variable to modify the behavior or the values shown in my chart. I can switch back to revenue and switch back to monthly, and the chart just renders. Very powerful. Okay, the next one I want to show is, this also is an example from a customer site. I used the eFashion data here to show, so let's say a manager for the accessories department requested this report, and they want to see all the stores and specifically these 2 categories, because within this department, these 2 categories are their main money makers. And so most of the time, that manager is only interested in these 2. Occasionally, they want to see all of them. And in that case, they can click on the select all, and it shows all the categories within that line. But as you can see, if this is the way they were presented the report every day, it tends to be a little bit of information overload, just because we have so many measures for each category displaying here. So the report is set up, and this was the customer request as well. When they open this report, and anytime it's refreshed, then display just these 2 categories the first time. And if we want to display the additional, we'll come over here to the input controls and include those at that time. Okay, so that saved them from having to filter that out later on. It defaults to their 2 main important categories, and they can do their analysis, and they're good to go. So I thought that was a real interesting way of using it. And let me edit this real quick to show where that was specified. So here on the default values, I was able to select values, and it shows me the values that are in my category. And I just selected the 2 biggest or most revenue categories for them to display there, and then reset on refresh. So now every time they open the report and refresh the report, it defaults to those 2 main categories. Okay, so nice way to get a report exactly showing the data that they want to see, the most important data, and yet keeping it flexible as well to include additional areas. All right, real quick, one other example here. they also have a slider in there. And so if I have a chart like this that is showing data that is difficult to see, I can use this slider to scroll down here and display data from the smaller categories, smaller states, revenues there, and zoom in a little bit more to see these charts here. Well, yes, those are very, only 3 orders. Yeah, very small. And then the chart below that is showing the weeks for a year in here, and it's allowing users to display, I really only want to see the previous 8 weeks. And they can focus in on those, or let's say I want to see half a year. And so I want to see the past 26 weeks. And it shows that, or I can show the whole year, which in this particular year, there were 53 weeks. And I can see the entire year, okay? Or again, just focus down on the most recent, say 16 weeks. All right, so this gives users the options to focus in on the data that they're most interested in and analyze their data. So that is what I wanted to show. There's one more quick thing. Need for Viz also has some controls that you can actually add to the report. And so these are add-on components, and we partner with them to add on these additional webby components, and I can configure them with input controls and yet have them on the report. I timed out on this one rather than. Okay, and then this is a multi-select, and what's cool about this one is it has a search feature, so I can type in monitor or even just start typing, and then use my shift key to select all of those and have my report filter for just the monitors on here. Okay, and quickly reset it. And the cool thing is that it's right on the report with the data that I'm working with. And they also have a slider here, which does similar behavior here that we had with the default input control, only it's right on the report, right next to the chart that we're working with. So that makes it really nice. I can zoom in to those lower states here that have fewer orders, and zoom back out very easily. All right. So that is what I had. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions right now, but that was really fantastic, Roxanne. Thanks so much. I mean, it seems to me as though input controls are really the underpinnings for, webby dashboards.
Yes, exactly.
Right. That because of input control. Yeah, because of input controls, you can build out lots of really interesting dashboards.
Exactly.
Somebody commented, very cool, Roxanne. Will you be uploading this recording to YouTube? I missed the early part of it. Yes, we will be. We will be making the recordings available on YouTube.